right. Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling a pretty heavy topic. We're going to be looking at the end of the universe.
Yeah.
Specifically, how it's described in the Bible in 2 Peter chapter 3. And we've got some pretty fascinating excerpts from a religious study lesson on the book of Revelation to help guide us along the way. But before we all start mentally building our, apocalypse bunkers,
Right.
we're going to be uncovering some really, really cool insights about the forces that are at play in the universe right now.
That's right. Yeah. We're going to be looking at how some mind-blowing physics concepts actually might be connected to these ancient descriptions of, a cosmic finale.
Okay, so our source material dives into this idea of three major cosmic tensions that ultimately need resolution. It's a cosmic drama in three acts.
Exactly. Yeah. And it starts with the spirit world, where the ultimate fate of Satan needs to be settled. Then there's the human realm, where you have the judgment of all souls. But the act we're really focused on today is that final tension, the fate of the physical universe itself.
So it's like imagining the universe as this giant rubber band, stretched to its absolute limit. All this potential energy just waiting to snap.
That's a great image to have in mind. Now, what if I told you there is a force in physics so powerful it could actually be the mechanism behind that snap?
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
It's called the strong nuclear force, one of the four fundamental forces of the universe. And it's no joke. Our source material even says it's 100 times stronger than electromagnetism.
Oh, that's wild. It's easy to take for granted how all the atoms in, say, this table are just hanging out, not flying apart.
Right.
But this strong nuclear force, that's what's keeping everything together, right?
You got it, yeah. It's the glue that holds the nucleus of every atom together, binding protons and neutrons incredibly tightly. Think of it this way. If the chemical bonds holding molecules together were like a gentle breeze, the strong nuclear force would be a hurricane.
So how does this tie back to the whole, into the universe thing we're talking about?
Well, if we look at 2 Peter 3:7, it says God's word is keeping the heavens and earth stored up for fire. It's like this powerful energy is being contained, held in check.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other verses like Colossians 1:17 and Hebrews 1:3, which suggests that Jesus, God, is actively holding the universe together.
Hold on. Are we saying that this incredibly powerful, strong nuclear force is like the tool that God's using to maintain order in the universe?
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it? Could this force that binds atoms, that fuels stars, also be the very thing that ultimately unravels it all?
That's a serious twist. Okay, so 2 Peter 3 paints this picture of the heavens being set on fire, the elements melting away. Are we talking about a literal atomic-level explosion on a universal scale?
It's a powerful image, and the source material certainly doesn't shy away from the dramatic language.
I mean, could you imagine the roar, the heat? We'd be talking about forces beyond anything we can comprehend.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a really interesting clash of worldviews: uniformitarianism versus catastrophism.
Okay, break those down for me.
So uniformitarianism basically says that geological change happens gradually over millions of years, like erosion, slowly carving out the Grand Canyon.
Right, so slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. But then you have catastrophism, which points to sudden, massive events that reshape the Earth in the blink of an eye.
Like a volcanic eruption that, instantly changes the landscape.
Exactly. And this clash of viewpoints applies directly to how we interpret the end of the universe.
Okay, so if we're talking about this sudden fiery unraveling described in 2 Peter 3, maybe catastrophism fits a little bit better with that picture.
It's definitely a point to consider. But remember, there are other interpretations too. Some people see this fire and melting as more symbolic, representing a spiritual transformation or renewal rather than a literal physical event.
Okay, so we've got a couple of pretty mind-blowing scenarios on the table here.
Right.
A universe literally going up in flames versus some massive spiritual shift that reshapes reality as we know it. Either way, it sounds pretty intense.
Intense indeed, and we're just getting started.
Well, in that case, let's dive into part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back, and my brain is still buzzing from that whole strong nuclear force revelation. It's crazy to think about this tiny force holding the entire universe together and maybe even having a hand in its eventual, ending.
Yeah, it really highlights that power and mystery. that's at play here, doesn't it?
Mm.
And this tension between, creation and destruction, it's a theme that runs deep, not just in physics, but in our understanding of the Earth's history as well.
You're talking about those two clashing worldviews we touched on earlier, uniformitarianism and catastrophism.
Exactly, yeah. Our source material actually goes into some detail about these two viewpoints. So uniformitarians would argue that the Earth's geological features are the result of slow, steady processes happening over millions and millions of years, like erosion gradually carving out the Grand Canyon.
Right. Makes sense. But wouldn't catastrophists say something like, hold on, what about a massive flood? That could have done that in a much shorter time.
Precisely. Catastrophists believe that sudden, dramatic events have played a major role in shaping the Earth. Things like massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, even megafloods. They might point to a geological formation and say, this couldn't have been formed gradually. It had to be a sudden, catastrophic event.
Okay, so how do we reconcile these two viewpoints? Like, is it possible that both are right to some extent?
Yeah, that's the big question. And it's not an easy one to answer. It's likely that both, gradual processes and sudden events have shaped our planet. The challenge is figuring out which played a larger role and when.
And how does this all connect back to our discussion about the end of the universe?
Well, if the biblical description of the end times is meant to be taken literally fire raining down from the heavens, the elements melting, that leans heavily towards a catastrophic event, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I can't imagine a slow, gradual process leading to that kind of dramatic ending.
Exactly. And this is where the discussion gets really interesting because while some people believe in a literal interpretation of those passages, others see them as more symbolic.
Symbolic, so not a literal firestorm, but maybe a metaphor for something else.
That's right. They might interpret that fire as a symbol of purification, a cleansing of the world, maybe even a transformation on a spiritual level.
So we're back to those two possible scenarios. Either the universe goes out with a literal bang, or it undergoes this massive spiritual shift that reshapes reality as we know it. Either way, it sounds pretty intense.
Intense indeed. But remember, regardless of how you interpret those specific details, the underlying message points to an ending and a new beginning, a transformation of some kind, whether physical or spiritual.
Okay, so we've got these potentially universe-altering events happening, but what does that mean for us down here on Earth? What's the takeaway for everyday life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it invites us to consider what truly matters. If everything we know is ultimately temporary, what are we building our lives on? What values are we holding on to?
Yeah, that puts things in perspective. It makes you think about your priorities.
Yeah.
And what you want your legacy to be.
Exactly. And maybe it even inspires us to live more intentionally, knowing that this world, this universe, isn't all there is.
It's funny. We started this deep dive talking about the end of everything. And somehow we've ended up talking about how to live a better life right now.
Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it? The idea of an ending often makes us appreciate the present moment even more.
That's a good point. And speaking of connections, there's one more thing from our source material I wanted to bring up. It's this idea that the strong nuclear force, the very thing holding the universe together, might also be the force that ultimately leads to its destruction.
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? The source material actually points to the fact that the binding energy that holds atoms together can also be released in incredibly powerful ways, like in a nuclear explosion.
So the same force that creates and sustains also has the potential to destroy. That's pretty deep.
It is. It speaks to the duality of nature, this delicate balance between opposing forces that exists everywhere. And it's a reminder that even in the face of immense power, there's always a potential for both creation and destruction.
Okay, now my brain is officially doing backflips. This whole conversation has been mind-blowing. But before we completely lose ourselves in the cosmic abyss, maybe we should do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. Okay, so we've gone from the strong nuclear force, which honestly I think is a way cooler name than it gets credit for,
Right.
all the way to these clashing worldviews about how our planet changes over time.
Yeah.
And we've touched on some seriously big questions
Yeah.
about the end of the universe. I feel like my brain is expanded, which hopefully is a good thing.
It's definitely a lot to process. But I think what's so fascinating is how these different concepts like the science, the biblical descriptions, the philosophical questions, they all kind of come together to paint this incredibly complex and thought-provoking picture.
Yeah, it's like we've been piecing together a puzzle, and we're starting to see the bigger image now.
Speaking of which, our source material really focused on the physical destruction of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But then it throws in this intriguing twist at the end.
Oh, you're talking about the mention of a new heaven and a new earth.
Exactly. Like if the entire physical universe is going to be destroyed,
Right.
what does that even mean for the concept of eternity? Like, where do these new heavens and new earth even fit in? It's like the source material saying, okay, we've blown everything up, but don't worry, there's more.
It's a concept that's intrigued theologians and philosophers for centuries. And while there isn't one definitive answer, it really does raise some profound questions about the nature of reality itself.
Yeah. If the physical realm is temporary, what does that tell us about the spiritual realm?
Right.
Is there a dimension beyond our current understanding where eternity resides?
Oh, okay. We're getting deep now. But I have to admit, I love that this whole deep dive has just opened up all these new avenues of thought. It's like we started with one question, and we've ended up with a universe of possibilities.
That's the beauty of exploration, isn't it? It's not just about finding answers. It's about discovering new questions, new perspectives that you might never have considered before.
So if we're leaving our listeners with one final thought to ponder,
Yeah.
and hopefully not lose any sleep over,
Right.
what would be?
I think it goes back to that idea of transformation. Whether we're talking about a literal, physical end to the universe or a symbolic shift in the spiritual realm, the message is clear. Change is inevitable. And while that can be daunting, it's also an opportunity for growth, for renewal, and ultimately for something new and extraordinary.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Absolutely.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows what mind-blowing discoveries await you.